Welcome to your next training video. So in this training video, I'm going to show you how to screen your client for the ESG program. So the first thing we're going to do is select your Enter Data As mode, and then click on the green plus sign for the Neighbor Center ESG Screening RRH program. RRH stands for Rapid Rehousing. And so you're screening this client to see if they would be eligible for these ESG Rapid Rehousing services. So once you're in your EDA mode for the screening ESG program, let's go ahead and go to Client Point, and we're going to need to search for the client that we're screening for the services. So the first thing we need to do is just search for their name. And if they do not appear in the matches, you can go ahead and add them to the database. And I'm just going to add the client only. If the client has a spouse or a child, you can go ahead and select this middle button that says Add Client and New Household Member. You know what? I'm actually going to go ahead and do that. We're going to practice adding a household member as well. So this is going to be, let's see, just a couple with no children. So Anna Fisher will be the spouse. And you do need to fill out these remaining data fields except for the alias field. It'll be full social reported, full name reported, and yes or no for if they're a military veteran. Search. And then there are no matches, so I'm going to add this client and click OK. Alright, so now we've got Bobby and Anna Fisher, and I'm going to click Continue right here. And then on this next page, we will set the head of household. So Bobby is going to be our primary client, and then Anna will be the wife. And now down here, this is your household member list. So right now we're on Bobby's client record. I'm just going to go ahead and click on this edit pencil and add the remaining fields for Bobby. And save. Alrighty, so Bobby's client record is good. Anna's client record is good, so now we will click Save and Continue. Okay, so now before we enter any additional data, we need to go ahead and complete the ROI. So you want to make sure that Bobby and Anna have completed their own individual releases of information, and they will either choose option 1, 2, or 3 with regards to how their data is shared. So we'll say that they have chosen option 1, which is to allow to share all of their information. And so the start date will be the date that they signed, and the end date will be 5 years out from the date of signing. Documentation will need to be set to signed statement from client, and then you'll type your initials in the witness bar. And save release of information. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is add the screening enrollment for our household. So you're going to click on the Entry Exit tab, and then once this loads, you're going to click Add Entry Exit. This will add the screening enrollment, and this is where you're going to complete your assessment as well. All right, make sure to include the entire household by clicking on this top checkbox. And then the type will always be set to HUD. All right, so project start date is today's current date, and you want to make sure to set the time to 8 o'clock a.m. you're always going to set your entry times to 8 o'clock a.m. No matter what time they actually come in and complete the assessment, we want all of our program enrollments to fall in line with each other so we don't miss any data when we run reports on this information. Now let that load. Finally loading. Alright, so the assessment has loaded, and this is the assessment for Bobby Fisher, and I know that because Bobby's name is highlighted right here in the household member list. So you can see you also have access to a couple of additional assessments that you will need to complete as well. But we're going to start with the screening assessment to determine basic eligibility. So you'll just start at the top and work your way down. So we'll go ahead and enter Bobby's date of birth. And the date of birth type should be full DOB reported. Now the primary, secondary race, ethnicity, and gender, these are all client self-reported. So you want to enter what the client reports, not necessarily what you as the case manager observe for the client. Secondary race is not a required field unless the client identifies with a secondary race. And then I'll just leave that blank for now. Then ethnicity, you will need to determine if, or the client will need to let you know if they are Hispanic or Latino or not. And then gender. Alright, so domestic violence victim or survivor, if they say no, that they are not a domestic violence victim or survivor, then that is the only question that you need to answer out of the 3 of these. If they say yes, then you'll need to populate the remaining 2 questions as well. Alright, so the household information. So for Bobby Fisher, we want to select that he is the head of household, the self head of household for the relationship to head of household question. And then you'll put the number of adults in the household and the number of children in the household here. And then for these next 3, you will need to briefly describe the client's current housing situation, list any risk factors for the household, and any needs. So I'm going to go ahead and enter those for you really quick. Alright, so this is just an example of what you could write for your clients depending on their situation, of course. So HOH, which stands for head of household, and spouse have fallen behind on their rent and were evicted about a month ago from their apartment. They have been living in their car ever since. It is difficult for the head of household to find employment due to his incarceration record from 2 years ago. So risk factors will include criminal record, poor credit, and excessive debt. And their needs include employment, credit counseling, budgeting classes, and spiritual counseling. Alrighty, so this next section is for the disabling condition. So to document a disabling condition, you want to determine if the client has actually been appropriately diagnosed by a licensed professional with a disability. So if they have a diagnosis of a disability, then for this drop-down menu, this is also what we call a gateway question. It's a gateway question that leads into this sub-assessment right below it. So we'll say yes, this client does have a diagnosed disability. And we also need to document it in this gray box. This gray box is the disabilities sub-assessment. So we're going to click on this HUD verification hyperlink. It has been unanswered, and you know that because there's a red triangle here. So you always want to click on the HUD verification. Never click on this add button. Never, ever, ever click on the add button. The add button is the bad button if it's outside of the sub-assessment. Always click on the HUD verification hyperlink with the red triangle. Alright, and so that'll open up your list of disability types. So what I usually like to do, just to save some time, is click on this no at the very top. It'll populate all of your answers as no, and then you can just find the disability type that the client has a diagnosis for and change that no to a yes. So I'm gonna change the no to a yes for the mental health problem. That'll bring up an additional little record set for the disability. This first drop-down menu, you are going to select yes, stating that this disability is expected to be of a long continued and indefinite duration, and it substantially impairs the ability to live independently. And then the note, you can type out the diagnosis. And then the start date needs to be the date of diagnosis, the approximate date of diagnosis. So if the client can't remember exactly when they were diagnosed, maybe they can kind of remember the year. So if he remembers it was sometime in 2018, you can just put 01/01/2018. It can be an approximate. And then the end date, you're not going to need to put an end date because we are documenting an active disability. Anytime you add an end date to one of these disabilities or one of these sources, it deactivates it. It says that it's no longer true. So we only want, again, to document active and current disabilities. And then we're going to select yes for is the above condition going to be long term, and then we will click save. And if the client has multiple documented disabilities, then you can remain on this screen and continue changing the no to the yes for all of the additional diagnoses. And then when you're finished, you can click save and exit. And now our disability has been completed. So you can see the difference between when we first started when it was blank to now it's got all of these sources. And again, this gateway question, which says yes, it needs to match at least one active yes in the sub-assessment, or there will be a data error. All right, so this next question, or this next section, is the legal history. So you're going to click add for under the arrest record sub-assessment. And then you'll enter the PIN number for their incarceration, if they know what it is. I think it's a 9-digit PIN. You can enter the address of the jail. If they were homeless immediately prior to entering jail, their date of arrest, date of release, how many months served, and then the type of charge and what the primary charge was, the state where they were sentenced, if they were convicted, the name where they were incarcerated, if they were connected to reentry, and if they were released to permanent housing. And then save. All right, and then you will answer these next couple of yes/no questions. So, are you or any member of your household a released inmate from any correctional facility? Individuals released in the last 5 years or in the diversion program who otherwise would be incarcerated. So, have they been released from incarceration within the last 5 years, or were they enrolled in some kind of a diversion program instead of going to jail? Was this the first time you have been incarcerated? If the answer is no, how many times have you been incarcerated? I don't know why that's highlighted. It's not going away. And then, can the client provide documentation? All right, so for some reason my computer's locking up, and oh, there we go. All right, we're good. So this next question, if the answer is no to if this was the first time you've been incarcerated, how many times have you been incarcerated? So we can leave that one blank since we answered this as yes, it is their first time being incarcerated. Next question is, can the client provide documentation of release from a correctional facility or parole/probation officer? Are you willing to sign, this is an important question, is the client willing to sign a 3-month contract with the Neighbor Center for reentry services, including housing arrears, rent, and utilities? Now, are you able to participate to the extent of possible payment for rental arrears, rent, and utilities. Alrighty, so I'm going to end this video here. I'm going to pick up at the homelessness and housing information section.